I'm excited to be here. I always like to present my work, and I'm always customizing every presentation. My husband can't believe how many hours I spend, but my learning is ongoing. So literally last night I was putting things in going, oh, what about this? What about this? If you see me present before, then you'll probably see something that's new. And then we all know repetition is important. So hopefully you'll gain, even if you've heard my message before. If the lighting isn't perfect, I apologize. I've worked really hard to get it right. And this morning it was really cloudy when I was setting up, and the sun has just broken out. And I learned that if you could face a window, that your lighting would be better. So I'm not quite facing the exact, I'm facing the window to the side a bit, but the sun has had a huge impact on. I thought, wow. So anyhow, but I have this brand new big board upon which to display my work. So hopefully that will make it easier when people are watching. I know it's going to be small in the background. So yes, thank you, Beth, for telling everybody that I'm from Canada. So for anybody who's not sure whereabouts in Canada, if you look at the map on the bottom, I'm on Vancouver Island, which is not Vancouver City, and it's not Vancouver, Washington. It's Vancouver Island in British Columbia, that big island in the middle. And then I'm on a little peninsula there, and there's the city of Vancouver. And these are photos taken 10-minute walk from my house. A student having a lesson, his mom is reading to him, or he's reading to her, I should say, on that big rocky area. And then this is me with a student going off for an outdoor lesson. I love to be outside. So I'm very excited about all the research that's happening in terms of how valuable it is to learn outside. That's another presentation for another day. So thank you again, Beth. It was lovely to have you invite me, and I enjoyed our communication to set this up, and thanks for your team, all those who are helping you with this. Thank you to the researchers whose work supports what I'm saying, and there are researchers from various disciplines cited in my presentation. Thank you to Dean Stanton from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. You will see his work throughout my presentation. I just love his fun and funky art. Thank you to the students and parents and schools and teachers with whom I've worked over the years, and their voice, and it could be the voice of a teacher from last week that has helped me learn. So thank you, everybody. Today I'm sharing my perspective as an educator, and most of my work now is consulting, but I have worked with a variety of special needs from the time I was 16. So just about every exceptionality. I am a parent, and that parenthood is always a part of my message. I am an author and the creator of materials grounded in research, and I wrote a book called Secret Code Actions. As soon as I finished the parent edition, or teacher edition, I started the parent edition. Just a heads up, full disclosure that some of the images you'll be seeing today are from that book, Dean's Art. I like Dean's Art to come into my presentations, that message of fun. And of course, I'm the creator of the ladder of reading and writing. And I am a doctoral student, and I'm about to embark on my own research. So that's a very exciting thing for me. So my current focus in my consulting, there are so many people now sharing the message of evidence-based reading instruction that I'm trying to focus on certain areas that I see are gaps, and one is differentiation. Another is advanced students, how to support them. Twice exceptional students who are gifted and have a challenge, an exceptionality of some sort, and then using movement to enhance instruction. And so you can see I am a learner. Today, we are going to talk about the range of ease in learning to read and write. We are going to just look briefly at the instructional implications because we don't have a lot of time, but I will briefly go through them. And I also know that other sessions in this conference will be going into detail about some of the things that I bring up. We are going to I will be referring to differentiation, and you'll hear me talk about exceptionalities, the exceptionality of dyslexia, giftedness, ADHD, and referring to students who are twice exceptional, gifted and dyslexia, or gifted and ADHD, or they could have all three. And my focus is really on focusing on the needs early. And so one of the issues is that our children won't yet be identified with exceptionalities, and there are good reasons for not identifying them early. So it's this area where I am saying we need to be aware of these people, but these children, but I also am aware that most of the children will not be identified. So the approach that many of us are using in terms of let's be proactive, and Nadine Gabb is so great about that word proactive, but I've seen it in the ADHD literature as well. Be proactive before issues start to build up, because we know the emotional ramifications can be really, really difficult if children's needs are not met. I realize we've got a wide group, and initially Beth and I talked about an interactive presentation, but once we saw the numbers, I said, I think I'll just present slides because we have so many people. There was no way we were going to be able to do breakout rooms and so on. So I realize that some of you are brand new, some of you are somewhat familiar, some of you are very familiar. All of us are still learning. That's so important to remember. And certain aspects are still debated. So I encourage you to question. It's okay to question, and it's okay to be prepared to shift and be open to shifting. And I say that we are asking our students to critique, so we must be prepared to critique as well, and to be open to the learning and the shifting that may be required. So today I want you to keep in mind Mark Sodenberg's words that I heard 2 years ago at the annual AIM Research to Practice Symposium, the AIM Institute Symposium. And 2 years ago, Dr. Sodenberg said, we need more research on translating science to practice. And he is still saying the same thing, and many, many others are saying the same thing. We also need to know about what works for whom under what conditions. And the latter update was very much centered on trying to make clearer that we have a really wide range of needs, and it's our responsibility to address the needs of everybody. And then communicating what we do not know from the research is really, really important. And I talked to you a few slides ago about the gaps. There are gaps, and I'm trying to address some of those gaps. And sometimes it's really interesting because I talk to extremely knowledgeable people, and their eyes will glaze over. They just, it's hard for them to shift to the recognition that actually we could be missing something really crucial. So I encourage you to join the brave Find the Gaps Club. I'm current head. And just recently, Dr. Jan Hasbrook's wonderful presentation about the science of reading, and her words that yes, there are a lot of solid studies, but this is not finished. This is continuously growing and evolving. And I hope that that gives some of you who are not just new to this, but some of you who have been questioning, the courage to keep questioning, because in order to do the best to serve all of our children, we need to be evolving and growing. And this is, these are my kind of areas that I've been focusing on in terms of the gaps, the differentiation under reading instruction, the need to recognize gifted students. And I know that in the States and in Canada and other countries, gifted students are an exceptionality, and their learning needs need to be addressed. And so we need to support teachers in how to do this, knowing that most of those children will not be in a gifted program. They'll be in the regular classroom. And my interest in movement on the far left, I've been using movement for 20 years and reading the research for 10 years. And there's just a lot out there. And then I won't be getting into it today, but if any of you are parents, just know I've got tears in my eyes because I feel this is also a real gap. How do we include parents as valued and integral members of the team, especially considering with dyslexia, there's such a genetic component. And I've always in my own practice included parents as true team members at every lesson. I love to see this. There are so many things I still want to do. But anyhow, all right. So Marianne Wolf, you just saw wonderful Marianne Wolf. And she was hugely instrumental in getting me into this field. I read her book and went to Boston and said, can I come and meet you? And I've learned so much from her. And when she says we are not born to read, that's a message that we need to not just listen to, but share with others. This is not natural, what we're asking for our children to do. So the ladder of reading and writing, the colors represent the continuum of ease to rewire our brain to do something that is not natural. For some children, it seems effortless. It is much easier. For some children, and those would be in the green, and my own children were in this group. They were reading before school. In the dark and the red at the bottom, for some children, learning to read and write is very challenging. And we need to be aware that they need specific instruction to learn to read and write. And they won't all need the same, exactly the same. Even within dyslexia, there's no child with dyslexia that's exactly the same as all the others. So we need to be aware that there's an ease in the range, and then within the different areas of challenge, there are still variations, and that's what these arrows are. Some children will be stronger in some things than others, and we need to be aware of that. So in the orange, we have children who come to school who are going to progress more quickly than most children with dyslexia, but they still need systematic explicit instruction. And I put code-based on my update very intentionally because in many, many schools, teachers are teaching what they have been taught, which is to teach children to guess based on the pictures. That is what the teachers were taught to do. And the research does not support that. We need to teach children how to decode words. So the code is very important. So on the right here, structured literacy approach, we'll get into that in a minute very briefly, but it is likely essential. Note the word likely. We still need to be open to the fact that our children have different needs. And so there may be a child you're working with who needs something else. So likely is much more the way researchers talk. I'm trying to do that. Facets of structured literacy up here means they won't need every part of the content the way a child in the red might need. They might need certain things. And then up at in the dark green, our children in the dark green will be learning to read and write at an advanced stage. And so we need to make sure that their learning recognizes their advanced abilities. And so differentiation, you can see, is hugely important. Oops, I always do this. I took the time to make these dotted things and then I always forget that I've got them. So yes, so the instruction for children in the red and orange will be much more explicit, many more steps, much more repetition, and supported, you know, in the research is the need for children with dyslexia to have highly customized instruction. And when you look at that, you think, yes, you know, how could we be doing a one size fits all? we would be missing certain children. So, and the focus is also very much these days on tier 1, general classroom. We know that some children may need more support in tier 2 or tier 3, depending on what system you use. But the goal is to have fewer children needing support outside of the general classroom. And the research is certainly showing that the earlier we start, the fewer children will need support outside the classroom. So then up here, we have children who have learning needs, and we must recognize their needs. And so from the research on advanced readers, using reading material that is below the student's ability may not only create halted development, but motivational problems. And so that's why we need to have a variety of different instructional materials to support our children, and then know how to teach. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying this is something we need to be doing. Excuse me. And then down at the bottom, a quote from my book on giftedness that I just bought last year. Negative growth of advanced readers is one of the most disturbing trends related to talented readers. And I'll talk about equity later. So on the right, I say you have to turn your head and look at the arrows, and we have this information in the purple arrow that we need to find needs based on data and then differentiate. So my wonderful colleague Jan Hasbrook, this is actually quoted her words that actually are in my blog post about the ladder update. And Jan is the data guru in my mind. But Jan makes a point of saying we need to collect the right data. We need to be, asking questions and getting answers to those questions from the data. And then we need to use that data to affect our instruction. It isn't just about collecting data, it's about what do we do with that data. And I know there's a lot of conversation about that. And I encourage you to read Jan's work, to go to her webinars. She's just absolutely wonderful. The blue arrow on the right-hand side, I've gone past, but I have 4 things listed there. Linguistic processes, just pointing out that not everybody with dyslexia even has the same difficulties in terms of linguistic processes. And Marianne Wolf's research really zeroed in on this, that you could have a deficit in, I'll just say phonology for now, a deficit in naming speed, or you could have a deficit in both. I have to go back and see exactly what there's so much discussion about phonology these days and terms used that I have to go back and see which exact term was it, phonemic awareness or phonological processing that Marianne used. So, but under the dyslexia umbrella, we have different needs and we need to address those needs. Executive functions, that covers or includes attention, working memory, and so on, things that impact learning to read and write. Psychological aspects includes anxiety and trauma. Some children have experienced trauma, some children are still experiencing trauma, and taking that into consideration. And then environmental circumstances encompasses dialectical variation, depending on even under English, there are many different dialects. And environment also encompasses the background of the child. And we know that children from low socioeconomic areas are at higher risk. But I do want to say that don't box them in and think that because they have come from perhaps what you think is an impoverished background, that they will not be able to do what you want them to do. And they might come to school already reading. So I think we have to be really careful about not boxing in people based on their background. So now I'm going to focus on what I mean by differentiated content and process, which is here in the purple arrow. And giving credit to Carol Tomlinson, whose work I learned about in the 1990s. Her work is well known by those in the field of giftedness. And in that field, there's a huge focus on differentiation. And one of the reasons for the update was because I just thought that most people knew about differentiation. And I realized that people were taking my work and delivering it in a one-size-fits-all, and not everybody, but some. And I wanted to clarify that that we need to differentiate in order to make this work. So looking at Carol's work, she talks about assessment as being the basis for our differentiation. So I put data, the purple arrow is referring to the purple arrow here. Then content is what is taught. Process, how our students learn. And from Carol Tomlinson's work, product, it varies. It might not be to do with reading and writing, because hers is more a differentiated approach to classroom instruction generally, and all the different subject areas. For reading and writing, I'm saying, okay, how are they demonstrating their learning of what we have asked them to do under this ladder of reading and writing. So looking at content, that includes phonics, and phonics is the speech sounds and the symbols, and phonics is simply the way we teach the connection between those speech sounds and symbols. And we know there's a lot of talk now. We know we want to be using letters as early as possible. So please don't delay in teaching phonics. As soon as your students, there's just a lot written about it. I encourage you to read it, but don't delay and just teach listening only. And then the meanings of words, semantics, how units of meaning combine, morphology, and how words combine in spoken and written language, syntax. And again, I've got Marianne cited here because her book was my introduction to all these different components within content. And so in my teaching and learning from her and learning from her program, I just have done that for so long that when I see people talk about just phonics, I think, wait a sec now, we've got to have all those other components. But the differentiated part is we need to know who knows what. Some children have stronger vocabulary. Some children need more work on phonics, but some don't. Under process, in the structured literacy approach, the focus is on systematic, explicit, and cumulative instruction. That means it's building. You teach one thing and then you build up. And again, we need to know who needs what in this. So some children don't need as much explicit instruction. And I'm sure that teachers and parents here watching, you know that different children need different amounts in order to learn something when they're learning a new skill. Some need 10 steps and some need 1. Some already know it. So the word facets is very intentional here, that we do not want our children who don't need something sitting through what they don't need. And the research of Carol Connor and her colleagues hugely has affected my understanding and my application of Carol Tomlinson's into the world of reading and writing. And Dr. Connor, if you look her up, you'll see she's got numerous research studies with other people, different people. I've got her cited, and by the way, my references are in the handouts. And I've cited her, and if there isn't a reference there that I've cited, please contact me, because I have a monster master list. And when I change my slides, I'm always going, oh no, now I have to go and update my reference list. So it takes hours. But anyhow, Dr. Connor was saying back in 2004 in this research that something considered high quality for one child may be considered poor quality for another. That's an important thing to remember. And so for those new to this, let me just try to, and these are brand new slides and X3 slides. The information is not brand new, but it's the first time that I brought them into my my presentation, because I'm trying to help people understand the range of ease in learning to read as represented by my ladder of reading and writing. So thank you to 5 from 5, wonderful website, and Multilit is I think they're the ones who host this, if I understand it correctly, in Australia. So the Aussies out here, it's a very collaborative approach. Thank you for what you're doing in Australia. So on this website, you'll find a lot of really valuable, easy to read information, but grounded in the research. And I'm excited my ladder of reading and writing is on this website. So anyhow, so look at this. The average adult skilled reader can recognize 30,000, between 30,000 and 70,000 words. We can't teach our children all those words. So how are they going to learn them? Well, the self-teaching hypothesis, and it's proposed by David Scher, is based on the concept that we are teaching phoneme grapheme. Actually, what the learners are learning phoneme grapheme correspondences and then applying this to new words. Now, some of us will be teaching this in the class, but my own children learned this before school. All right. Now, with each decoding, they're going to have the ability to get exposure to orthographic patterns and build the foundation for skilled words reading, a skilled word recognition, sorry. And this is going to help them read increasingly more complex texts. So we teach them the patterns, and then they build and build and build and get more and more exposure as they are being exposed to text. But at the same time, I'm bravely taking two different things and wrapping them in, because maybe this is helpful to some. So statistical learning is looking at the fact that our language is made up of patterns, and that we are going to learn some of these patterns outside of our lessons. Okay, that's called incidental learning. And please forgive me, Dr. Sodenberg and Dr. Treeman and all those wonderful people who are experts in this, if I'm not explaining this properly. I'm trying to do the layman's term. And I've moved it, but this is actually out of, what I'm coding on this slide is out of at the bottom you can see here, it's a brand new issue of Scientific Studies of Reading, talking about statistical learning across languages. And so when I got this issue, a week or so ago, I sat down and had my lunch reading it, and I was so excited to see this. And I thought, oh, I need to put it in my presentation. So then at the bottom here, the finishing part of this quote is that, and it's from different parts on page 139, learning to read and spell words involves not just the learning of taught rules, but the extraction of untaught patterns, statistical learning. And so I hope that helps some of you. Between Scher's self-teaching, they're going to be learning more as they're exposed more and then applying that. And then statistical learning, bringing the incidental learning. I hope that helps you better understand that, that range of ease, because children are learning at different speeds. So going back to the differentiation, Jewell and Midden Cup, their research in 2000 showed that children who had weaker skills when they began grade 1 progress more quickly when they provided with code-based instruction. But children with stronger reading skills made more progress when the emphasis was a literature-rich environment. So I hope that thinking about statistical learning will help you see that that our children can move along, and David shares self-teaching. The children are going to move along at different rates, and if they can already decode, we want to give them lots of exposure to text, and their instruction is going to be different, less emphasis on the code. Differentiation implementation. There are various ways to do this, and I'm just going to talk quickly about the under the ladder of reading and writing. In the research that I've quoted, they've talked about skill readiness. So where are they on the E's, on the continuum of learning to read? And then we group with according to skill readiness. But we also don't want to box our children into just being in one group all the time. So if you're differentiating, I hope you're differentiating across the curriculum, and I hope you're considering personal interests. And for children who are twice exceptional, who are gifted and have ADHD or dyslexia, this is really important. Children with ADHD may be advanced readers, but may still have the need for support in terms of writing. But children with ADHD also could be anywhere on the continuum, because the research suggests that their ADHD may interfere with their learning to read and write. So we need to make sure we keep that emotional in mind. We want to be boosting at all times if we can. And another way to do it is personal strengths, and I'll show you another example. And I've got blog posts, by the way, that address some of this. I'm so busy, it's hard to find time to write more, but I'm hoping to write more. But if you go into my blog post, you'll get an overview of some of these. And here's where we can really be looking at providing assistive technology. So we can group children in personal interests and strengths and put them in different groups. And if they can't read, maybe that's where assistive technology comes in. So Carol Connor and her colleagues came up with their own way of describing, excuse me, how they differentiate. And I really like this too. So they look at the content of literacy instruction. Okay, that's that skill readiness. And then they look at the grouping arrangement, and it could be small group, pair, or individual. And then what they do is they say, okay, we think about who is managing this, who is controlling students' attention. It could be the teacher who's controlling the students' attention. And so they describe that as teacher-child managed. It could be the student working with other students. And so they are in an independent group, and they're responsible for managing their attention. Or it could be a child working independently. And I do want to point this out, because if you have a child who's really, really advanced and has really good self-regulation skills, let them work on their own, as long as you're making sure that they are being supported, and you still want to spend time with them. It's not like they go off on their own and you never spend time with them. But a child working independently is not a bad thing. So I'm really a fan of Dr. Connor's work. I realize the organization is key. You could be differentiating in one classroom. I really like the models where teachers are working collaboratively. I'm really hoping we get more collaboration as schools change instruction. So you could have all the grade 1s collaborating to do your grouping, or you could have grade 1 to 3 collaborating. There are various ways to do it. Kindergarten could be part of it. Remembering my own children were reading before school, so they might be able to be with the grade 2 group or the grade 3 group. But the key is scheduling. So if you're a leader, I really encourage you to support your teachers in making the scheduling happen. I've seen this fall apart just because of scheduling, not because teachers didn't want to, not because parents weren't excited, not because it wasn't working well for the students, it just was scheduling. So, and oh, parents, here we go, include the parents where possible. I really encourage that. I know that a lot of teachers still want to have their whole group time, and I know that in the area of reading, there's some concern that some children will miss things, and it's really hard sometimes for people who are used to working with children who have more challenges to wrap their heads around the fact that children in the dark green might not need explicit instruction. So what I say is, if you know, and you're going to have your own setup the way it is, but if you have whole group instruction, make it very intentional, and students are receiving what they need. So if you're worried about students getting that skill, that you just want to cross that off your list and make sure they've got that phonics skill or that morphology, you know, introduction, then focus on that. Make it quick. And I'm a big fan of bringing in movement. I cannot tell you how much research there is on movement, and I move my books, but I've just read 4 books on movement. I just got another one just, I think, 2 days ago. And I've been saying for a while, I think we're missing the golden opportunity. Every child brings to school their body, and it's free, and every child wants to move. So why not weave in skill-based movement into your whole group instruction? Because then everybody's getting up and moving. And then if you go off to your groups after that, they've been up and moved their bodies, and you've primed their brain to learn from the movement. So quick, but bring in movement. And then what I suggest is pepper information while you're doing your whole group. I encourage you to have advanced readers lead or else extend it. So if you're doing something and you were doing a semantic map, you were talking about word meaning, maybe your advanced readers will build a semantic map ahead and then bring that and share that with the class. And I'm a big fan of pre-teaching our children in this area, particularly children with dyslexia, who are gifted, who are twice exceptional, because it's very frustrating for very bright children to be behind. So I'm saying, why would we not set everybody up to be successful in whole group? Why do we have this model in most places where we're teaching the new skill in whole group? Why don't we actually teach it ahead to those who might need more steps and more explicit instruction? And then when we have our whole group, they can participate and feel good about knowing that what we're working on. Twice exceptional students, I've said already that these students, the way I am using it, they're gifted and have another exceptionality. The research on twice exceptional, it makes me really sad. I have to share that when students are assessed as gifted and they have a disability, the focus becomes their disability. The giftedness is rarely addressed. And so again, imagine these bright children who are so capable, and their focus all of a sudden becomes what they can't do. We need to focus on both. We need to teach them to read and write if they have dyslexia, but we need to recognize their huge abilities. And so I say, make it intellectually engaging. And I put this word fun here because I really think that we want teachers new to this and even experienced teachers to know this can be fun. And I think it should be fun. And for somebody who's really bright and struggling to do what is hard for them, I think we need to make it fun, especially if these are little children. If we're focusing on being proactive, we have little children and they love to have fun, and I love to have fun. So this is your, permission to have fun. We need to find their strengths. I talked about personal strengths. I talked about interests, and that's really, really important for our twice exceptional, gifted, and dyslexia. And I hope that you'll see that if we can learn how to better support their needs, that it may give us ways to better support the needs of many other children. So recognize and nurture their intellectual abilities. Gifted children are often very curious. They often ask questions constantly. So let them ask questions. Let them ask questions about the English language if you're teaching English. Let them ask questions about morphology. Encourage them to ask questions. Encourage that cerebral engagement. Look for their personal strengths and interests. And in terms of dyslexia, some people are advocating that some children have certain strengths because of their dyslexia. I align myself to the research that says we still don't have enough evidence to say that. We don't know, we don't have strong evidence that everybody with dyslexia is stronger in certain things, but there's no reason why we can't find personal strengths. Everybody has personal strengths. So the way I describe it is find their personal strengths and their interests, and then weave that in wherever you can. And then the environment, this is grouping. We really want to make sure that we vary our groups, and remember that your child who is gifted and has dyslexia may be advanced in math. And so make sure that if they are advanced in a subject, that if you're looking at that skill readiness, that you're providing for that. A few things on advanced learning, because most people think advanced learning. And I've even heard people say on social media, I don't really care. I don't really want to know about those who are advanced. I just want to know how to help struggling learners. And that really saddens me, because I think, shouldn't our point be to better serve, and I use that very intentionally, serve all students? And so we need to know how to better support everybody. On your reference list, I have a link for the Acceleration Institute. I just talked about a child who may be advanced in math, so they could maybe go to another grade for math, or at least be advanced within their classroom. Acceleration is supported by the research. Curriculum compacting, I have a link there. I will tell you, there's not a lot yet about how to compact curriculum in terms of this. I'm on a mission to find that. So if you have been curriculum compacting your instruction and you've set up a model, I'd love to hear from you. I just haven't had time to do it myself. Otherwise, I would have just created something. Grouping for talent or interest, I taught you about that. There's a link to the NHEC information about that. And advanced reading comprehension, Renzulli and Reese developed what's called the school-wide enrichment model for reading. And that is a model that can be used with advanced students, but it also can be used with twice exceptional students if they're supported with technology. And within that, sometimes students are going to more academic texts or disciplinary literacy. And I love Shanahan and Shanahan's description of disciplinary literacy, which is an emphasis on the knowledge and abilities possessed by those who create, communicate, and use knowledge within the disciplines. It's a different way of writing and communicating. And so some of our advanced readers will be really intrigued by that. Often gifted children have an interest that they're really, really into, and they will know more about it than most adults. And so this is where that disciplinary literacy can come in. And I love the fact that we can cross from the giftedness research on the left to disciplinary literacy under this in the right. And an example is Dr. Shanahan's blog post on disciplinary literacy in 2017. And he had a link in there that went into William and Mary. And if you're from the giftedness field and you're aware of that, teachers aren't trained enough on giftedness. That's another story for another day, but if you're in the giftedness field, you're probably familiar with William and Mary materials. So I was pretty excited that to cross that bridge when I saw that. So if you have thought, oh, you know, advanced learners just they should just, you know, read a book on their own on the side. I'm not saying don't give them reading time to do that, because they will want to read and we want them to read. I'm just saying that their program is can be developed the same way we would develop a program for anybody else. Now I want to look at the art on my ladder of reading and think about the climbing children. And first of all, I talked about fun and the children are smiling. That was very important. When Dean first made the art, I said, Dean, can you please make the children smiling? It's so important to me that our children are smiling. If our children aren't happy, we know that, you know, if you're not happy, it's harder to learn. But the other thing that I'm now saying in terms of ladder is the climbing, the act of climbing the ladder itself is movement. And I really hope that we'll see more about movement in learning, because it's certainly out there in a lot of other areas, but there's a gap between the disciplines. So when you think of climbing the ladder, we are thinking of moving. So again, Marianne's words were not born to read. Many other people are quoting them, but that's where I first learned them. And then David Geary, I'm just going to refer to him in a minute, but I put it here intentionally because we are born to move. And David Geary's theory is that there are two forms of learning, and one is biologically primary is what we're born to do. We're born to move, and biologically secondary is would include reading and math. We're not born to do reading and math. So children need to move more, and I think that the COVID pandemic has made that even more visible. And again, I'm seeing so much more research on the need to move, and many of our children were not moving and still aren't moving enough. So movement in the school setting, I was researching this or reading the research, digging into the research 10 years ago during my master's. And I found so much research already 10 years ago saying, you know, that school is a great place for movement. And we never have enough time. So that's why I said, if you bring movement into your whole class instruction, that's a good, in my mind, a good use of time. And there are certainly publications that say that support that. Improves attention to task. And I'm going to be getting into ADHD a little more in a few minutes. Increases enjoyment. Well, you've heard I'm all about the fun. So hey, why not enjoy it more? And I love this, indispensable to obtain optimal cognitive performance. Well, don't we want optimal cognitive performance? And then all those were from way back when I did my master's 10 years ago, I found them. But my favorite article is really this one. It's on your reference list. And it's a wonderful article talking about integrating task relevant physical activities and how the research supports that they would have a positive effect on learning. So here's Dr. Geary again, biologically primary, speaking and moving. Biologically secondary would be math and reading. And then from that article that I just told you about, the 2018 article, basically saying it can be argued that our body, our human motor system, can support the learning of complex tasks. And I'm not getting into it a lot today. That's another session, but there's research on using movement may help decrease cognitive load. So lots to be learned here. So children with ADHD, I'm finding that they are, nobody's really talking about them too much when it comes to reading and writing. And they're in our classrooms. 3 to 10% of our students are thought to, are likely to have ADHD. And under the area of dyslexia, if you look at the fact that 20 to 40% of children with ADHD have dyslexia, we need to keep ADHD a part of the conversation. And so look at this, and this is from a brand new book. Oh, I moved all my books when I set up my new area, and I usually have this, but this is an edited book by Russell Barkley, that thick on ADHD, but I've read the whole thing. But this is from one of the chapters, and talking about the fact that our children with ADHD, they don't do well in low stimulation environments. They don't do well if things are dull and repetitive. They do better when things are unusually novel. So let's have some novelty. And other research shows that if our children are engaged in physical activity, that may result in better behavior than seated. And then here, children who are not able to sit still may be more engaged and learn better while being physically active. So let's look here at twice exceptional, gifted in dyslexia, or gifted in ADHD. Again, I'm hoping that you can take some of this and say, well, I could actually, have my whole class doing this. And here, remember that our children who are gifted and have ADHD might also have dyslexia. I've just put gifted here. So they need novelty and they need movement. Recognizing their intellectual abilities is really, really important. And think of those children who are very, very bright and have ADHD, and writing is really hard. And we need to support them with helping them get those writing skills at the same time as recognize they're smart and not suggest that they're not capable because they can't write. And I was just reading a newer chapter in a book this morning on writing and starting, in preschool and kindergarten. And I think what happens is for some of those children, writing is difficult. So we put it off and we say, oh, don't worry about it, they'll get it later. And actually some of them, it compounds. So again, personal strengths and interests. Our children with ADHD, if you can capture their interests, they'll be really into what you're doing. So keep in mind that need for those strengths and interests to be recognized. And one of their strengths is movement. Let's look at that as a positive, not a negative. And novelty, wow. And the environment, well, I'm just going to say, get them moving. There are lots of different ways we want to be careful with our grouping, but I hope you can see here now that it's so important, because when children are twice exceptional, gifted, and have exceptionality, some of the research suggested it magnifies their needs, become even greater. It's not just 1 + 1. And I'm actually going to be developing a presentation about this called 1 + 1 = 5, gifted in ADHD. So anyhow, I'm working on that presentation. So you got the title and I haven't even got the slides yet. All right, so actually, I think we're almost on time. Wrap it up. I hope that you have a better understanding of my infographic if it was new to you. Even if it wasn't new to you, I hope you have a better understanding as to the instructional implications of the range of ease, and thinking about how to use data And I would say we need more support for teachers on how to use data when a child is showing advanced. And I've been saying to people, well, you know, if you've used a certain grade, go to the next grade, see where they are. Don't put a ceiling on them. And in terms of gifted research, they say, don't put a ceiling on them. Like, let them find out where they can go, let them go higher. And I hope that the blue arrow has made clear that we need to factor in lots of different things. And I said I would talk about equity at the end or just raise it. I've got 2 slides. The first one is that educational equity does not mean educational sameness. And so my ladder of reading and writing is all about recognizing individual differences and recognizing the value of each student. And I hope that if you look at grouping with strengths and interests and so on, that can shift your perspective a little bit with regard to making children really feel valued, especially when they're not mastering skills as easily. And then I think it's my final slide. The need to move our children as quickly forward as possible is really important for children coming from low SES backgrounds. In this report, called A Nation Deceived in 2004. Wonderful, wonderful report. You'll see it in my references. They talk about this. And so I talked before about the need to move our children forward. And if we box our children in, for children who are coming from backgrounds where they don't have all the opportunities outside school, school is the place that's going to give them the opportunity to move forward. So we need to be really aware of that. And then last here, decisions not to advance children who are ready for advancement communicate to those children that their thirst for learning is not valued by adult decision makers. So when they want to learn, we've got to capture that. All right. Oh, look at that, 10:46, woo! 10:46 Pacific time. Yes, so that is my last slide, and then we have 15 minutes for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. It was wonderful, and I just love the graphics on the slides are happy and fun and wonderful as well. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Just and again, if you want to use any, you've got the slides. I've given a PDF. If they're for your use only with this conference, and if you want to use any images, please contact me. My email is there. All right, so stop share. All right, faces, yay, people.
Yeah, so we have a number of questions. I don't know that we're going to have time to get to all of them because I'll have to end right at 11 to go start another session. But a couple of topics kind of came up, and one thing people are wondering about, as am I, is about how are you suggesting we include parents in these discussions? And then as part of that, also not only about children's strengths, but also about when some families seem to be a little bit in denial about what their children's reading ability really is, and how do we get them to understand the work that we're trying to do to improve their child's reading. I don't know if that makes any sense. So suggestions about involving parents primarily.
Okay. So the first part, in my own practice, I had a parent attend every lesson, and I would love schools to welcome parents into the classroom. If we look at the fact that some of our children with dyslexia need 200 repetitions, then and we're sending home things for parents to do, why would we not welcome them into the classroom and teach them? And that was my goal when I set up my own private practice. I thought, because I'd worked in a clinic and parents weren't a part of my lessons, and I spent so much time in the waiting room explaining everything after. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to set up my own private practice and parents will be there. And my experience was that parents really appreciated knowing how to help their children learn. And I just don't think we're offering that. I did find one paper. I haven't been able to find anything more, but I did find one paper where parents were given, brought in, and they had a course and they taught the parents. It was, I think, evening or something, and they taught the parents some of the skills that their children were going to be learning. I was actually talking to Jan Haswick about this just a week ago, saying, oh, we need to know more in this area. And so I don't think we have a lot of models. We certainly have research that says when parents are involved, it's very beneficial. Children do better. So we have to figure out how. So for now, I encourage you to welcome them into your class and let them learn how to help their children at home. And sometimes parents are doing different things at home, and then it actually can complicate it and make it harder for a child to move forward because they're getting two different ways of the same thing. They see it as different things. So, and then sometimes people have help outside school, and then 3 different things are happening. We need to all be on the same page. So that this, the more we're doing exactly the same thing, then that's better. In terms of parents and skills, the data, if you are using reliable assessments, then there are lots of really, really good, I'll quote, simple screeners. People have worked very, very hard to make them user-friendly, to screen children and to get data. You have different, really screener that might have 4 questions, and then you get more, more in depth and so on. But share that with parents and show them what the assessment asked for so they can understand what it was. And then many people have written me, teachers and parents have written me for permission to use my work in presentations to parents. It's very valuable to explain these. And then, to point out that your child could be very smart and still need a lot of explicit instruction. And I think for parents of twice exceptional children, it is really frustrating because they know their children are super bright, and then the children are having trouble mastering skills. And there's this dichotomy between all the things. And so it's all about educating parents, educating teachers, and getting everybody on the same page. I hope that answers that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Somebody kind of sent a follow-up to this, which I think is important to note too, that sometimes these are the same parents who didn't have a very good experience in school either. And I know that one situation I've worked in recently, sometimes I think the parents think, I don't trust the school to teach my child to read because I didn't learn how to read in school. And so what do they even have for my child? And I think you're right, being able to share the latter, being able to share, things like when we know better, we're doing better, we're trying to do better, and that sort of thing.
The link between parents and how they feel about school is huge. And some parents have told me, they hope they would never, ever have to go into a school again. And now they're trying to support their child. And it's actually traumatic for some parents to go back to school. And it's very intimidating. I've talked to parents a lot in my private practice and in my parent, I've done parent groups and so on. And we really, really need to be respectful of where they are. The other thing we need to do is be respectful of the home situation and the fact that there 2 things might affect them not showing up at a meeting. One, they might be just trying to work to get food on the table, and our interview times are not always conducive to them. So I really encourage you to communicate and find out how they can meet. And the second thing has gone from my head. I had another thing. It was maybe it was tied with that school failure, but they just feel it's it may be a waste of time because they never had success themselves and they're so frustrated. So communication, I would love to see starting from the beginning, really openness to supporting parents, showing them, how the school is teaching reading and showing them how the range is being met. Because you're going to have parents like me who say, okay, what about my child? They don't need that phonics instruction. So you really being aware of the wide range is very important.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said exactly those words just now, because that reminded me of a quick question that was in there that I just wanted to point out in the chat. And that was about children who are kind of on that top end of the ladder, who are reading pretty, automatically from an early age. But I'm pretty sure it's on your ladder that they might need some explicit and systematic instruction in spelling, right? Isn't that on the ladder as well?
Well, it doesn't say spelling here, but I did say that in my blog post. So
Oh, yeah, I knew
yeah,
I heard it
yeah.
someplace.
And the point is here that if we are tracking and seeing how they're doing, we're going to know if they need spelling and writing help. And so we can't assume that they're going to not need help with something else, but there will be, just like there are so many different needs within the red, there are so many different needs in the green. And yeah, and by the way, are you able to save the chat? I would love to read the comments at the end if it's possible.
Yes, I will. I should be able to save the chat, and I think that's a really good point.
Yes,
And
I can't watch the chat and think at
no,
the same
no,
time.
I know that's very hard.
But I appreciate it, yeah.
Then there's so many good questions in here. It's really hard to choose just one to wrap up. But there were some questions about screeners and data. And I think even at our website, and lots of other people can recommend big lists of screeners. I don't know if you want to get into that today.
I would say that if your website has things, go to your website. I would say look up Jan Hasbrook's. She's in her wonderful book, Conquering Dyslexia. She talks about screeners, but she and Michelle Hoff gave a really good webinar recently on curriculum-based instruction. Nadine Gabb, go to her website. She had a spreadsheet with lots of different screeners at one point. I looked recently and it was down. It was, something being fixed. So I don't know what it's like, but there are lots of things. In my mind, the biggest thing about screeners in terms of schools is that teachers work collaboratively to choose their screener. They're all on the same page. When I consult for schools on this, what I've done is I recommend choices and then the teachers choose rather than somebody else choosing. And then they'll choose it based on their needs. They choose it based on, how often they're going to give it, whether the data is collected in, some sort of technological way. So really, teachers, I encourage you to be collaborative about this. And if you're a leader, I really encourage you to listen to your teachers' voices. With all of this, with selecting programs, we know there's not one perfect program. So we've got to have different programs in the schools, and teachers need to think about, okay, what do we need for our students? And then, if you choose a kind of a basic one, okay, how are we going to enhance it? There's never going to be one program that serves everybody. So it's really important to keep that in mind.
I was just going to add one more. I think often also if you go to the NCII or even What Works Clearinghouse, they often have some good lists of screening and even diagnostic tools that you can do there as well. Because there's loads of them. Stephanie Stoller also talks a lot about that. She's doing a session actually right this minute. But if you look up some of her work, she has some really good information about what is a screener and what's important to look for in both screening and diagnostic data that you are making decisions around. Yikes, we only have 2 minutes left. I don't know if you have time to answer the approaches or interventions that are most effective with kids who may have lots of these exceptionalities, severe ADHD, anxiety, dyslexia all together. Is there one, I know typically people don't recommend programs, but the systematic or structured literacy, would you assume that would still be good for them as well? Or do you have other approaches?
It depends on where they are in terms of ease, and then what they're showing in terms of their data. And then, yeah, it's, I too many factors to consider.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's important for teams to be collaborating, because you know, if your district has a list of assessments, that's great, but we also need to know how to read the results of those and be able to, you know, make really good decisions around supporting students and all of that. So thank you, Nancy. This was wonderful.